Thanks very much for the introduction, Louise. So I'm going to say what my kids say. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about all of the problems, and what I kind of like people to do is see if you can count how many mistakes I've made throughout this, because I've dared, I'm too scared to top them up and work out exactly what I've done. I will just move that as well so you can actually see the slides. I've got a 3-screen setup, so I feel like I'm like the woman in the chair with everything going on. So just tell you a little bit more about me. Oh, my slides don't appear to want to be moving forward, so that's really helpful. Let's try and hit that one. There we go. A little bit about me. So I've been a clinical librarian since March 2004. So a clinical librarian ideally brings evidence-based healthcare, evidence-based medicine research to the doctors in their clinical settings. Now, I've not actually been, there is me on a ward round. I'm there on ITU back in 2004, so I look very, very different, very young there. And I've not really been on a ward round for a long time because I'm doing more and more research type work. But I have spent my entire professional career working in NHS libraries, which is purely by fluke. I was hoping to get into academic libraries. I really fancied being a humanities librarian when I was at university. But I was geographically limited when I did my master's at Loughborough. And after graduation, I was applying for jobs that were in a radius, a commutable radius from where we were living. And I got an NHS assistant librarian job, which was lovely because you got to a little bit of everything. It was quite a small setup, and it was nice to be able to, you know, do some of the basics like interlibrary loans, do general inquiry work. But what I really discovered I loved doing was the literature searching. So people asking us for questions, and I would package up results. I would literally print them and send them off in the post. And I would often on a compliment slip just write a little story of how I'd come about finding the results and which ones I thought were the best. And it turns out that's not that far from what a clinical librarian did. So I then looked into whether or not I could get into that kind of thing as a career, and I managed to get a clinical librarian job at George Eliot Hospital in Nuneaton, and I was there for a few months setting up a service from scratch. But I found it really lonely because I like being with people. And when a job at Leicester came up where I was working with a team of clinical librarians, I knew I had to make that job mine. And so what I've found is that I really, really like literature searching. I like finding out the answers. I like approaching things as though they're a crossword puzzle to solve. So this kind of job really, really suits me. I'm going to ask you a few questions. What's a systematic review? Because you know what, I've been trying to find a definition of one. I've been doing my my actual literature review for the professional doctorate, and I can't find a standard definition of what a systematic review is. So I'd really love you to tell me in the chat what you think it is. Because it feels really philosophical, so we should go completely back to basics. I've read things that saying that systematic review has to contain a meta-analysis. Well, as librarians, we've got nothing to do with those, I hope. I mean, if you do, brilliant, well done. Please tell me all your secrets. But yeah, what is a systematic review? Sorry, that's disappeared.
Do you want people to write in the chat, Pip?
Yes, please. Sorry, I might not have been clear about that. Please write in the chat. Please tell me. But if you want to put your hand up and actually speak, even better. If you're happy to be on camera.
Yeah, even better if you want to speak.
We've got some really interesting things coming through. Transparent, reproducible synthesis of existing evidence on a defined topic. I like that one a lot. I'm trying to read quickly. And yeah, it absolutely depends on who you ask. And if someone comes to you asking, saying they're doing a systematic review, the first thing to ask is, what do they mean by that? Absolutely. Oh my gosh, yeah. What do you really mean? Do you mean? And are you doing a systematic review or are you doing a literature review? And yeah, I admit I've used Booth's definition, but I'm not sure it's quite what I want. And looking at the Cochrane definition, again, I don't think the Cochrane definition fully explains. They talk about different types of reviews, but they don't really. It just, having read it, it didn't really feel like to me they were saying something that was, you know, a nice defined couple of sentences that really say what it is. So yeah, I'm really not sure, and I think this is going. I think there's going to be quite a few thousand words from me on what a systematic review actually is when it comes to this professional doctorate I'm doing. And I think there's something in all of the definitions that I've seen coming through so far. For me, I think the main thing is that it's got to be reproducible, and that's basically it. It's but that's not a definition. But you know, I think that it's the reproducible method that is key for me as part of a systematic review, and it being a defined topic. I may well tell you about some of the types that I've done over the years that aren't defined in any way, shape, or form, and it does make you wonder, what have I really signed up to? So I will definitely come back and read the rest of these, and you may well find yourself acknowledged, hopefully in 3 or 4 years' time. So let me tell you about my first systematic review. So for this, we need to go back in time, way back to June 2005, when we received a letter from Sir Muir Gray, at the time from the National Programme for IT from the NHS. So if anyone remembers that, oh my goodness, well done. We've come a long way, and yet absolutely no distance at all since then. This was known as the Safer Handover Project, and confusion reigned. We thought we'd been commissioned by someone very important for us as clinical librarians in Leicester to do a systematic review. We felt very special, we felt very important, we felt very scared. We weren't quite sure what we were meant to be doing. And this isn't a typical starting point for a systematic review. This isn't something that usually happens. So it felt very exciting. We didn't know if there was any funding attached to this. We weren't sure what was going on. I believe we did a lot of work that wasn't used for this, because the University of Leicester also ended up doing some work. And I've got a feeling Viola's on the call. She may well have some memory of this as well. Yeah, really strange thing where I know I did a lot of work because I was the clinical librarian for intensive care, and I'd actually been to a lot of handovers. I used to regularly go to the handover on a Thursday morning because that's when the consultants changed from the week shift to the weekend shift. And so I'd seen a lot of them. We'd also used a lot of electronic devices. So the actual project ended up being the role of portable electronic technologies in reducing the risk of adverse events following patient handovers. So it was about whether or not we should be handing over using PDAs. And so we are talking the pre-smartphone era, which, you know, some of you may not even remember. So this was actually, you know, it never got published. My name is there. I was Pip Rimington then, not Pip Divall. And Linda Ward was my line manager, and Rob Power was the person from Leicester Hospitals from that group, and the rest of those people were Strategic Health Authority or University of Leicester. And I can't find it having been published anywhere, which again is a real shame because a lot of work went into it from our side and from the university side. But I know we did it right, or at least I know that Jeanette did it right. Jeanette Kamoso-Stefanovic did it right because I think she did most of the searching. And that, I can still see problems there because Embase is not actually capitalized as a database. But apart from that, you know, that shows when we were doing the searches, it shows that they did it pretty well, and search strategies used were shown in Appendix 1. So we were ahead of the curve. We were following things according to Prisma before Prisma really became a thing. So there were some good parts there as well. And let me tell you about my first real systematic review, my one that I did all by myself. We were lucky enough to be able to have access to funding for something called Learning Beyond Registration at UHL back in the mid-2000s. And I was sort of told that there was a pot of money that could be used for my CPD. And so I chose to enrol in the part-time Masters in Health Services Research from the University of Leicester because my line manager, Linda, had done it. It felt like a really good thing to do. And I thought it'd be really, really helpful to better understand the way research happens in health. And so it's a part-time 2-year course of teaching, and then you could choose whether or not to continue and do the masters and get the, do the dissertation, get the full masters. At that point, I chose to have a baby instead. But as a true completer finisher, I came back to it in 2009 and thought, actually, I really want to get this done and I really want to do the dissertation. It's important. And so at that point, it became clear that I wasn't going to be able to do any form of original research in the time available. So I was going to have to do something that didn't need ethics, didn't need to go through lots and lots of hoops. What's doable, what's good for a librarian to do, a systematic review. So I think that was my first mistake, to be honest. I did it all sort of, I'm calling it analog. There was no Rayan, there was no Covidence then. I did it all using my own version of RefWorks and through the legacy version of RefWorks, plus basically bits of paper. I've got a box file, I think, in my loft that still has all of the printed out articles with the data extraction form stapled to the front of them. I got to the point where I was completely immersed in the 7 papers that made it to my final data extraction. And I could tell you what they were saying inside out, back to front. I knew exactly what was going on with them. However, there were some problems. I did the literature search. I used the HDAS database. If anyone in the NHS remembers, it's been a little while since we lost it, but I didn't search all the databases at once. I'm not that bad, but I did all the search in HDAS, which is basically not reproducible now. But then I searched Medline, I searched Embase. I think I searched CINAHL. We'll have to go back and check. What I did was I limited it to English language. That's a big no. I searched from 2000 onwards, arbitrarily decided a date. I think it was sort of justifiable. I think I did justify it. We can go back and see in the full text at some point. I did the first screen all by myself without the supervisors. So the supervisors just had to do the second screen of the ones that I'd already sort of title and abstract screened, which was probably wrong. And I did the data extraction completely independently. But, it's there. It got published. It happened. Please feel free to go. There are typos in that. It's amazing what gets published these days, isn't it? And people do still, I do still get emails from predatory journals asking me to follow on my excellent and eminent work on the use of personal digital assistants in clinical decision making. And I delete those emails quicker than you can read them, because I am not going back there. I'm absolutely not going back there, and I'm not really that proud of it, but it did happen. In doing it, I used the York Centre for Reviews and Dissemination book, the ebook that's still available online. That was my guide throughout. I followed that like it was, it was the thing. I did everything it said. I had to keep going back to it, and I don't think it's actually been updated since 2009. So, but I do still recommend it to people because it was excellent in making me feel that it was possible to do, and it clearly was possible because I did do it. And the thing is, I've done it, so I've been through the whole process, so I do feel qualified to talk to people when they come to me for help, to say, look, these are the things that you need to do. These are the mistakes that I've made, and I really don't want you to make as well. I absolutely now refuse to limit the language on any search, no matter how many times they send me their Prospero protocols saying they want to limit it to English. I say, you can't. They say back to me, how am I going to translate it? And I say, well, look around you. You've got colleagues who are not born in the UK. You've got colleagues who have more than one language. Just because you may not, it doesn't mean that you can't find someone for the price of a coffee who will sit and read that paper for you and fill in your data extraction form if you ask them really, really nicely. And then the very last resort is run it through Google Translate if you can. Make an effort. So I have used my very, very rusty A-level French to translate a paper about ankylosing spondylitis in pregnancy to work out whether or not we needed to include it in a paper in a full systematic review. And we didn't need to because it was a review, but I was surprised by how much sense I could make of it and how it was it was actually quite straightforward to do. So I've done one, but like I said, please don't go back to it and think that it's any kind of example to follow, because there are mistakes there, and I'm certainly not sitting here being really, really proud of it. But moving on from there, I cover orthopaedics as one of my clinical areas, and one of the lovely consultants who was quite new to the trust at the time got in touch with me and asked if I would like to sit and have a coffee with him and have a talk about an idea that he'd got to basically create a publication farm of papers being churned out by orthopaedics, lots and lots of systematic reviews of all the stuff they were doing. And he really felt like a librarian needed to be involved in it, and that we could get lots and lots of things happening. Now, this was brilliant because he thought they could be done quickly. And one of the first meetings I went to, one of the professors in the department said that a systematic review will take 6 weeks. 2 weeks, do your search, 2 weeks for 2 junior doctors to screen the papers, 2 weeks to do the data extraction, and 2 weeks to write it up. Done. So, can it be done? Well, this meeting, the first meeting we had, was in September 2014. Paper got published 2023. A really, really bloody long 6 weeks, isn't it? So, yeah, and someone just said they just fully laughed out loud at 6 weeks. Look, that's not the funniest one I've heard. I heard a PhD student saying they were going to do it over Christmas. So, meaning the 2-week break. So with the Publication Factory, we agreed at the outset that I'd be named as an author on all of the papers, that we'd have regular meetings for progress reports. They always shifted. This one in particular, so this I've done lots since that started after and were published before this one, and I can tell you why this one didn't work quite so quickly, and that is because 2 of the junior doctors rotated out of the trust, and they are now consultants working in completely different trusts. And what would happen is a new junior doctor would join, they would be given the stuff to do to work on the paper, and they would get so far, they would get me to update the search, they would get along the process, and then they'd move on and it would be the next person. And so this one went through 4 updates, I counted. So so 4 search updates and lots and lots and lots of meetings. And this was the first one in which I felt my professional integrity was called into question as well, because we'd agreed on the search, we'd agreed on the search parameters, we'd agreed on how they were going to include and exclude. They were very specific about, they wanted it to be post-thrombotic lower limb. And then I went to a meeting where they said, well, why didn't you find these 2 papers? And I felt sick to my stomach that I'd not found the 2 papers. So I spent a long time looking at the indexing of those papers, looking at the strategy, working out why they hadn't come up. And it was because they didn't mention lower limb and they wanted to include them. Now, I have learned from this. And now if somebody says to me they want a particular thing in the strategy, I will say to them, look, there is a box on the far hand right side of that Prisma flowchart that says articles found through other means. My search will not find everything. My search is not perfect and cannot find all of the papers ever published. So you really have to sort of trust me at some point that I've done the best I can, but it won't always pick up all of those things. You can have that blinding flash of inspiration in the middle of the night and just hit on the right formulation of words in Google and find a paper that's not been indexed in Medline. And it's not always fault of the search. You know, it's papers aren't always indexed there. You might be doing something else. You know, there's lots of reasons why a paper might not come up. Also, indexing. It's not infallible, is it? I always tell people not to use things like the major concept because you can't trust that it's been used consistently. Subheadings, you can't trust that they're applied consistently. So I can't believe that this one took 10 years. Lots and lots have been published since, and that have been quicker. And I do know of one that did take 6 weeks, which we will come on to. So what I do now with people, things I've learned over the years, and it's taken a long time to get to this stage. I like to have a meeting with people. I like to do it via Teams or face-to-face, where I get to see the whites of their eyes, make sure they know what a systematic review is, as we talked about before, make sure they actually know what they're doing, make sure they know how long it's going to take. You know, not giving them this example of it being 10 years, because that's going to terrify everyone, but also making them realise that it's going to be a lot longer than a few weeks. You're talking 6 months to a year. And it took me a year to do mine, and it took a further year to get it published. And then it took a further 6 months, actually, from the point of submission to it appearing in the journal. So they're always taking a long time. What I also do then, when I have these meetings with people, I tend to do what I call a scoping search. Now, this is really, it's really unhelpful language. And this is where the definitions are quite important, but it's hugely unhelpful language where we've got scoping reviews that are actually published as scoping reviews. I do a scoping search where I look at Medline first, usually, and I go through with them what kind of things they can expect in the search. We talk about the keywords, we look at some of the results, and what I usually do is send them the first 50 to first 100 of the results and let them have a look at the strategy, discuss the strategy with the rest of the team if there is one, or at least if they're on their own, make them sleep on it. Make them aware they will need a team as well, but make them sleep on it. I will not run a search from them saying, yeah, that's okay. Because I know that I will change my mind. My husband calls me a contrary canary. I change my mind literally on an hour-to-hour basis sometimes. So the way I approach a search will not always be the same. And that usually means that they come back to me a little bit later and want me to do the search. Now, one of the weirdest mistakes I've made, and I don't know how I've managed to get into it, a lot of them seem to think they need to be with me while I do the search, which is unusual. And, you know, it's not, I do say watch me search is not the best form of anyone's time, really. Watching me do my job is quite boring. So I have had to manage some expectations. So that's what the meeting is about as well, managing expectations. And it's usually at this point that I think I ask for authorship. Don't know if it always happens, because I'm so used to saying the same things over and over that sometimes maybe I'm forgetting to do it. Let's move on to cheating, because that happens. I've had more than one person come to me who's wanted to sort of cheat their way around a systematic review. In one case, they'd written it already, and they just needed me to do the search to show that they'd found the papers they'd found. So they'd already got the papers they wanted to use. They'd already done the data extraction. They just needed a search to hang it on. That was an unusual way of doing things, and I did tell him it was a little bit naughty. He also was the consultant that saw my son in fracture clinic quite often. So, you know, I've got accident-prone kids, so I need to keep on the good side of these orthopaedic surgeons. But I have allowed a little bit of retrospective. Yeah, as just said, having tested papers is okay. Absolutely. I usually say to people, have you already found some papers that you would expect to find within this search? That's absolutely fine. I just think where you've done it first and you're doing it backwards, that's kind of not cool. I think one of the definitions is a priori, and that means first, doesn't it? So retrofitting the search feels wrong. I'm not sure I'm counting it as one of my mistakes, but it doesn't sit quite right with me. But absolutely fine. Making sure that the things you would expect to find within the search is definitely an important part of doing the search. I have another question for you that I'd really like to know the answer to. And that is searching an art or a science? And so I would really like people to put their answers in the comments here. We've got art, we've got both. An artistic science, I like that one. I was doing some work with an infectious diseases doctor about a year or so ago, and she did want to keep watching me do it. She said, I love what you're doing, it's so artistic. And that made me feel quite special. It was quite nice. So I think, oh, a craft, that's a good one. That is a good way of describing it. And I have a follow-on question from that. Are you an expert searcher as a librarian? And the question may well be, what is an expert searcher? But do you describe yourself as an expert searcher? I've got lots of people saying work in progress. No, I think, you know what? I think we're allowed to say it. So I think if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I'm not sure because it's a while since I've updated it. And to be honest, I don't even know what the password is anymore. I might have put that I'm an expert searcher because I think it's okay to call yourself that sometimes, because we definitely have more expertise than sometimes the clinicians that we're working with. But at the same time, I'm not sure I would ever call myself an expert in anything. I usually say I've got experience of. So when I'm teaching people critical appraisal, I will say I'm not an expert in critical appraisal because I don't think you can be. You're always learning. Everyone's saying you're always learning, but I have experience. So I'd probably say I've got expertise in searching. You're always learning. You're always coming across new terms, new things to add in. I learned a new term just this week that I could not find. I was going through the Medline term finder in Ovid, and I was looking for disease transmission. And I put in transmission and it didn't come up. I was looking for human to human transmission, essentially, looking for this term. And no matter what I did, I couldn't find it. But I was sure there was something in there. So eventually I did manage using keyword terms to find a paper, looked at the indexing. There is disease transmission, infectious as a subject heading in Medline. So it's there as a mesh term. But it took some finding, and I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't come up when I was mapping it to the thesaurus when I was using the term finder. It just wasn't happening. So there are weird quirks of the databases. You're always learning. You know, mesh does love a comma. I tend to think it's a little bit like French, the way the definitions seem to be slightly different to natural English. But yeah, you're always learning, that you're always coming across new terms, and obviously they're always updating the index every year. So there's something new. So some of the things that we did to search for COVID to begin with were very, very artistic because we were trying to work out how we could get these exact terms. Now they've added in the very specific mesh heading for it. It's easier, but then they haven't retrospectively indexed things. So we obviously do have to do a bit. So I think it is more of an art than a science personally, but I like craft. And I'm really interested to know as well, who actually got any real search training as part of their library studies? So let's call it library school. Who got training in how to do a search at library school? We got very brief training on dialogue, and that was it at Loughborough in 2002. So a lot of what I've done has been learned on the job. I have been to the York training with Carol Lefevre and Julie Glanville, which was brilliant. So high level, so terrifying, but also fantastic. And then a lot of, I've seen lots of things, but got an hour on dialogue, even in 2018. So wow. Yeah, yes, that was it. It was dial-up dialogue that we learned on at Loughborough, and it gave you a price at the end of how much your search had cost, which was amazing. So yeah, searching is like a huge part of what I do, but I didn't learn very much of it at all at university. It's something that I've learned on the job. It's something that I've gone through, and each search is a bit better than the last, I think. But is it really? And then there's the quirks of the databases as well, you know, learning how to get the best out of them. I will tell you about an example I have. This is one thing I am actually proud of that I think I did quite well. I did a search on de Quervain's tenosynovitis, which is a kind of, it's a thumb issue. It's Texter's thumb, it's known as one thing. So that may be something you come across. And when I was doing my literature search for it, I did put in all of the terms. So it's known as Texter's thumb. There were a few hits for that. It's known as BlackBerry thumb, which was really strange at first because I'd completely forgotten that BlackBerry phones ever existed. And I was imagining some kind of black bobbly thumb rather than something from using a small keyboard too much. It's known as washerwoman's thumb. It's also known as nintendonitis from playing on the Wii or the Switch. So I put all of these terms into my strategy because I wanted anyone looking, even though there were 0 hits for like BlackBerry thumb, I wanted to be able to show that I'd done a really, really top-notch job on this and thought of every single potential term that could have been used. And I thought that was right for reproducibility. I was a bit unsure, do you leave a line with 0 hits in? Because sometimes if you see a line's got 0 hits, there's something wrong with what you've done. You've made a mistake somewhere. But I thought it's the right thing to do. Pop it all in. And yeah, I cannot tell you how proud I was of that. I can tell you what happened next in a second. That's coming up. My next philosophical question is a recipe still a recipe if you don't publish the full list of ingredients? That's a chocolate rosemary loaf. The recipe is available on request. It's by Rukmini Iyer, and I think it's in one of her, I think it might be in the sweet roasting tin, but it's in one of her newsletters. It's absolutely amazing. Yes, you do put rosemary in the batter as well as in the ganache, as well as on top of the cake. Really, really nice. So when you're reading a systematic review and it says we use these terms and it doesn't tell you how they were employed, that doesn't give you in the supplemental materials the full strategy, at least one of the strategies, can you use it? Can you trust it? Do you know how it's been done? Has it been done correctly? Even if it's got a librarian named as an author, did they have any say in how that was published? Did they have any input into the final paper? Because I know I've been named on stuff that I haven't written, that I haven't had sight of the final paper, even though you're supposed to. I know this has happened. And yeah, if you don't have the ingredients, how can you know what to do? And I will say, when I'm asked to do a search, I will often look to see if there are systematic reviews already existing to see if I can use those, especially the Cochrane ones, because they're usually pretty reliable, but not always. So yeah, someone's put in the chat, show me exact search terms so I can still be inspired by them. I do always tell people if they have stolen sections that they really ought to reference the search I've stolen bits from. I don't know if they do. Not always, because but at the same time, is it really copyright theft? Probably is, yeah. So there's some mistakes as well. Probably add about 30 to the list for that. And then this leads to the question, if you are creating the search strategy, if that is your intellectual property, if those search terms have come out of your head and those combinations are because you've done it, do you deserve authorship? Should you be named as an author on that paper? Because you can't do a systematic review without the search. So yeah, it's really interesting. The ICMJE criteria, the International Congress of Medical Journal Editors, it does say that you have to have had a significant part of the research design or concept and had some input into the drafting and had sight of the final one and take responsibility for it. Now, I would say, yes, I would do all of those things, and I've offered to do all of those things for people, but they don't always take me up on it. And so I'm going to tell you what my solution is to that shortly. But yeah, the search strategy by systematic review was carried out by an experienced clinical librarian who is not named as an author on this paper. We have given you in the supplementary materials the entire search strategy, which is recognisably the work of that person. But they would just like to acknowledge Pip Divall for her assistance, not having done the entire flipping thing. So yeah, and it's not the first time it's happened. It's not the only time it's happened, but it's the first time I've been really annoyed by it. It's happened lots and lots of times. So I think one of my mistakes here was not having been really clear at the outset what I expected from people and not having it in writing. And it's not for want of us having, I was asking, have you done further work with these authors? I've done further work. I've done previous work with them as well, and had been named as an author on previous work, and I've also done further work as well. So I think one of my mistakes was not being clear. I think if we're going to be generous, what might have happened is the same as what happened in the post-thrombotic paper, where people had moved on. It turns out when you send someone an attachment with your literature search results in, they pass them around. They give them to other people. I'd never really thought about it. I always thought that the end user was the end user, but they're not. So I had someone contact me recently asking me why my search hadn't found these particular papers. But I'd not done the search for that person. I'd done it for someone else entirely. So I didn't know what they were doing with the results. And when they'd asked me for that search, they had certainly not asked for it as a systematic review. So I again, professional integrity called into question, some despair, some anger, found all the papers, found exactly why my search hadn't found them. But I'd approached that as a clinical librarian search where I'd done a summary and I'd selected the appropriate papers, not as a systematic review. So I did say I was never told this was a systematic review, and so therefore I approached it completely differently. Yeah, watermarking all future documents. I mean, that's the thing. We do have a template that does have our header and footer, but we send it as a Word document, so maybe we ought to send it as a PDF so it can't be altered. I mean, it feels like an extra step too far. I think most of the time people are being pretty upfront and pretty okay with us. I have started since 2 weeks ago, started sending, because we had all of this documentation before and I just wasn't doing it. So there was another massive mistake. I was being so bloody British and thinking that it was okay. Sure, we've worked together before. They've always named me. I'm sure it's all going to be fine. But we have a tiers of service document for our organisation, and it sort of sets out what we do, and we adapted it from Kirsty Rickett at University of Queensland, who came and presented at the Clinical Librarian Conference in 2019, and so she allowed us to base ours off her work. And I think lots of people have similar things now. And in my literature review, I've read about a lot of services in North America that follow this kind of principle of they tell you what kind of services on offer, and you have to sign a learning agreement or a memorandum of understanding or an assistance agreement. I have started sending out the assistance agreement, and funnily enough, the person who hadn't named me as an author and I discovered did ask me for another systematic research recently, and I have gone back and I've said I will do it, but I need you to sign this document. So I'm doing it now. I'm doing it with everyone, because I tell you what, it feels awkward the first time, but if you just do it blanket with everybody, regardless of whether you've worked with them before, it's a lot easier. So yeah, that's my advice to you. Don't be British like me, just ask for it. But I can tell you that the first time I asked for authorship way back, and to be honest, in the Publication Factory initial talks, that was when I was saying, yeah, it is really important if you're going to get me to be involved, I probably need to be named as an author, if you don't mind. Oh, would it be okay if? No, you've done the work. If you've done the work, you deserve your name on it. Even if 5 or 10 years down the line, you think, well, I could have done a better job on that. And I think some clinical staff see things slightly differently as well. They see authorship as a gift or a privilege. There's still that very much that, yeah, I will send a link to the assistance agreement. Well, I'll send it around. I don't think we've got it online, but I'll forward it on. Yeah, I just think that we need to be firmer, essentially. I've learned my mistake. One other good thing I can tell you is that as a result of having a little whinge on Twitter, which I didn't mean to do, but I was so upset, it just sort of tumbled out, did lead to one of the consultants, actually, he emailed asking for a paper. So I forwarded in the paper, and then he put PS. I hope it wasn't one of us who did it. And I forwarded in the paper and just said, yeah, I just think these things happen, and left it at that. But he came back and said, you've not answered my question, have you? And I said, well, yeah, it was one of yours. And he said he was going to raise it at their next research meeting. So I'm actually expecting an influx of people requesting help first, because they'll have reminded people that I exist. But I am expecting people now to be a little bit more cognizant of the fact that it is a large piece of work on my part. And it's invisible labour. And there is a paper about the invisible labour of librarians, which I've not put in my references, but I can send around, because I found it a really, really interesting paper. So what was my tally of mistakes? Have we got there yet? Do we know? Did anyone keep count? Oh, and I've not even told you about all the different ways you can spell all wrong yet. I think there's at least 5. Definitely RO, definitely OT, definitely if you just touch typing and you do the keys either side. Yeah, 5 or 6, and I have done it. And one of my misspellings actually went into somebody's masters. But they should have checked it, really, shouldn't they? So I am actually proud of some stuff as well. Because I don't want to turn this into me berating myself, and for you to go away thinking, well, goodness knows why she was allowed to talk to us. She hasn't got a clue, has she? So there are some things I'm proud of. I'm really proud of some of my searches. I think some of them were actually, they were art. I wouldn't frame them, but you know, I've done well. I'm really proud of the fact that I am quite firm with people now. So I've every single thing is a learning curve. I've learned to be firm about the language. I'm now going to be much firmer about the authorship. There are 31 published systematic reviews on PubMed with me named as an author. Now, that's not to say that they're all good. So please do not at any point think that those are me saying you must do it like this. But you know, for someone who, when they were growing up, when they were 8, like in this picture, actually wanted to be an author, it's not quite the murder mystery novel or the Chalet Girls, Chalet School type novel that I tried to write as fan fiction. But it's something, isn't it? It's proof that I do have value. I do add value. I have done an all right job on these things. I am a writer. I just don't write the things I wanted to. And also with those 31 systematic reviews, there are a lot more that I've done work for that don't have my name on. So really, yeah, I must have done quite a lot actually. And I did try to find out, but it's actually really hard. We discovered that you can, we discovered this this week, one of my colleagues, Catherine Wilbur, who deserves a name check for this because she's done a lot of work on it. You can actually search acknowledgements in Web of Science, but only if they're reported in the funding field. So if you search, you can sometimes find them, but it was only one of them that we found with mine. So it's not a fail safe, and obviously, you know, acknowledgements isn't really a field that gets used. And that's only if they remember to acknowledge you. Quite often they just put, you know, a search strategy was created in consultation with a librarian. But I've definitely helped colleagues to get their masters. I've helped people with their PhDs. Perhaps don't quite get all the credit that we deserve for it, but you know what, it's just nice knowing that you've helped people sometimes. And yeah, I am proud of the fact that I am going to be doing some work on this. While I haven't quite got my research proposal entirely figured out yet, there is something in, do we need more guidance on how to conduct systematic reviews as healthcare librarians? Is there something that can be done around that? So that is my aim for the next 3 years, is to find that, and you may well find me getting in touch with some of you to possibly be my interviewees. Oh, Sarah said something really lovely about me, but I'm not going to read it out because that would be really big-headed. So, but thank you. So, that is, I'm just going to leave my very proud face up there because yeah, I quite like it. The next slide is references, which I will put up. But if anyone's got any questions, or if there's anything in the chat that we need to discuss, that would be a great time to do it.
Thanks, Pip. I'll read what Sarah said in the chat. You should also be proud of how inspiring and supportive you have always been to your fellow clinical librarians. Stop being so British.
Oh, well, but mainly though, I don't want to be any mystery to anything that we do. There's no mystique about it. I don't want to present sanitized versions of things. I've done things wrong. Hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, but also make some of your own because it's quite fun. No one dies. As you said to me yesterday, when I was panicking about this, no one dies as a result of these, unless, you know, they're based on entire clinical practice on an incorrect systematic review, but then that's not your fault. So
to be fair, I did have a little bit of a, because I say, you know, no one's died, and then I think, oh, maybe someone dies in the future.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was a bit like,
don't say that to me now. I'm going to examine everything.
I have actually had a look at your LinkedIn profile while you were presenting and you haven't put expertise on.
Oh,
you've put highly experienced researcher.
Oh, maybe I was having a humble moment then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Highly experienced researcher is what you wrote on there. Experienced trainer in faculty development. So yeah, you didn't put expertise.
And I do think there's real use in the label of calling ourselves expert searchers to clinicians. I think that's a good way of presenting ourselves, but I wouldn't want anyone to think that I prize my way of doing things so highly that I'm not prepared to learn or change my approach. So, and I guess that's, you know, if you think about if an expert is someone who spent 10,000 hours doing something, definitely there, sadly.
Well, you know, yeah, if we work out how many hours we've spent, I'm sure it's a lot.
Yeah.
Before everyone starts going, I want to ask, and I did hint at this at the beginning, and I did say to you yesterday when I spoke to you that I was going to ask you about it because I think other people might be interested. Librarians seem to be doing quite a lot more research now. They seem to be in the research field quite a lot. People are doing PhDs. And I was wondering how you found the application process, how you got sponsorship, because it's such difficult. Everyone's tightening the belts. So
Yeah.
how did you get around it?
So laying a lot of groundwork. So I did the clinical librarian impact study work with Catherine James at Derby and Mick Heaton, and Alison Brettle really kindly sort of helped us out with that because we were essentially copying her homework, but that's what good science is, reproducible. So we reproduced in the Northwest study, and it was a huge amount of work. And in the end, I was like the main author who wrote everything up. But through doing it, I started to think about other ideas. You say you'll never do it again. And it's kind of a bit like childbirth, isn't it? You then start to think, oh, well, maybe I could, maybe I should. And as a bit of a wrap-up conversation with Alison, I was like, well, maybe I could do something around this. I'd quite like to do another article. But then as I thought about it, there was no way I wanted to do that much work just to see it published in a journal and then disappear. And the only legacy for it to be was predatory journals contacting me every day asking me to publish within 2 weeks for $49 or whatever. So I thought I'd like to get something out of it myself. And if it's going to be a proper piece of research, do it properly from start to finish. And because I'm helping PhD students, you know, having done the masters was so helpful in understanding what they go through. Doing a PhD would also be really, really useful as a process, as well as getting the output at the end. And I'm getting emails addressed to Dr. Pip Divall anyway. I even had Dr. Pip Divall.
I get professor. I'm like
oh
that.
well, you're much better than me then. Yeah, so just Dr. Pip Divall. And so I thought, you know what, I'd like to do it. And so there was a lot of groundwork of explaining to my manager why it would be useful over a number of months of cultivating a relationship with Alison, who is now a supervisor, you know, getting her to believe in me that I could actually do it. And now I've definitely got to prove it. The process of applying, it wasn't easy. I had to find my GCSE results from 1995. My daughter's sitting her GCSE English language today. I had to find my GCSE English language result. Thankfully, I know exactly where it was because I'm a librarian. It was just under some stuff in the loft. So I did have to, on a very warm day, climb into the loft and pull out the big box of things. So, and then getting my trust is paying for it through the fact that I've managed to bring money in through literature searchers. So some teams have, we've provided literature search systematic review training to University of Leicester PhD students who are working in the biomedical research unit. So they've paid us for that. So it's money from that has gone towards what I'm doing. So I'm not stealing from the NHS. I've earned it. And so it's external money that's paying for it. And so, yeah, the process has been a little bit, it's not straightforward, and it's taken me about 3 years to get to this point. But yeah, it's just been little by little chipping away.
Yeah, but it's good that actually they've seen how your input has made that impact, so they're willing to invest in you now.
Yeah, well, it does help. Actually, I also want to say all credit to Linda Ward and Claire Honeybourne, who set up the Clinical Librarian Service at Leicester, who had it written into our job descriptions that we should be contributing to the research output of clinical librarianship as well, so promoting the role. So technically, it was always in my job description. I'm just fulfilling it.
Well, to be fair, when I first saw you, I think a couple of years ago, delivering, so you was already fulfilling that role anyway, presenting, you know, and getting it out there. So yeah. Has anyone got any questions for Pip? We've got just a couple of minutes, that's all. No pressure, nothing. The chat was flying at one point and I was really struggling to keep up, so it'd be good to go back and have a look.
It's a real shame when you're presenting, because actually I really enjoy the parallel chat of these things. There's sometimes something else going on in the chat to what's actually going on from the presenter. So I'll look forward to catching up on that.
There's loads
put my
in the
references
Q&A.
up.
There's loads in the Q&A. Give me a second. I forgot about the Q&A. Someone's just reminded me.
Right, well, I'm going to stop sharing the screen then now.
Okay. How long on average does it take you to do a systematic review search for someone?
Ooh, about a day. I usually leave about a day for it all. Partly because sometimes the databases are slow, because there's the one I was doing today about COVID transmission. There's so many technical terms and so many knots in it that the actual database took about 5 or 10 minutes to load it, which is and it's not necessarily the search. Sometimes the search is easy. It's getting the results out. The fact we actually have to send them the files, that takes ages, especially if it's a big one. When we used to have the limits on Ovid where it was 1,000 results at a time, that's the bit that takes forever, and I hate that bit.
Yeah, I agree. So second question, since so many of us have had no formal training, let alone in searching, let alone systematic reviewing, do you think it would be helpful if there was some kind of qualification in SR? It seems to me it would fill a major need and help improve standards and professionalism.
I think maybe, yeah. I mean, there's obviously lots of courses that are available to people. And yeah, I don't know if having a central one is, I wouldn't want to take away people's business for a start. You know, Exeter, York, lots of people do, you know, they have got little industries in doing it. I wouldn't want to say, but at the same time, it would be really, really useful if there was more of that, or if we knew what needed. So maybe that's going to be my prof doc, you know, what knowledge and skills do librarians need in order to be systematic reviewers.
I just saw something pop up on my screen about Isla asking about mentoring, but that's in the chat and I'm in the Q&A now. If someone wants to do a systematic review, what questions do you need to ask when you have your first meeting?
Yeah, so have you ever done one before? Do you know what it is? What are you planning to do? What's your question? So there's so many things. I've started asking people now if they have a protocol, a written protocol, because sometimes they do, not always, and you don't have to have one. And you know, it's really helpful if they've decided they want to do a Prospero one, because it's quite straightforward and you can follow it through. And it helps you, you know, they're serious. What else? You know, have you sort of some things like, have you got much experience of searching? Usually, because I kind of have to know whether I'm explaining everything to them, or whether I'm, you know, whether they're fairly au fait with it. What else do I ask them?
I sometimes ask them if they've even got a question, because sometimes they've not even got a question.
Well, yeah. So there's one that I'm working on at the minute where we have changed the question a couple of times. I think there is an issue with the question.
Yeah, so sometimes it's not even, you can't even go any further because the question's not right. Someone's just said they ask if they've got a team. Someone's asking if they've got a protocol. Yeah.
I now ask them what kind of software they plan to use, or how they plan to work with the results. And I very deliberately ask them that, because if they say, oh, we're going to use Rayan, I think great, brilliant, have at it. If they say they're not sure and they seem to be about, you know, they do seem to be doing it. We do have an institutional subscription for Covidence, but I've only got 40 licenses, and I'm only giving those people that actually are going to name me as an author for a start, because it's come out of my budget. And I'm only giving it to people who I think will finish them.
Yeah. Well,
because again,
you want the usage out of it, don't you?
Yeah,
they're expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been lucky enough to be able to have that.
I've got a question. Are you a one-line or multi-line gal, from Isla?
Oh, so always one line. If you mean like every single term on a line, yeah, always. It's like building with Lego. It's my colleagues are so sick of me hearing me say it, but I think it's like building with Lego. So if you do it all in individual 2 bricks, you can take those out. If you do it in those big 6s, you can't take them out. I mean, but I do love seeing, I used to love that HDAS did that. I love seeing it all as a single line. It's just so satisfying when you can read that and understand it. It's like a different language.
I do tell people that it's like doing a Sudoku every day.
Yeah,
it's like doing a puzzle every day. Another question, what software do you help them with, if any?
So I'll give them a quick orientation to Rayan or Covidence if they ask for it, especially if they're doing Covidence. So I will give them, and somebody recently was, you know, I went as far as, you know, we went through the data extraction on Confidence Together. So I'll do a lot for anyone who asks for it. I do think Confidence is really straightforward and really easy to use, though. So a lot of people just run at it and they're happy.
Rayon's changed it now, haven't they? They've got where you can do Prisma Flow. We've got a trial.
Ooh.
Maybe
I've only
contact the
ever
rep.
I've only
Maybe
ever used the
contact the
free
rep.
version.
Yeah.
And people seem happy with it, because if it's doing more than it was, because it was just doing the screening originally.
Yeah. There's one more question. We've got one more time for one more question. It says, how far do you take the practical help? For example, there's carrying out the actual search, but who does the presenting according to Prisma?
I will give them the numbers and I expect them to do their own Prisma. So I'll give them, when I send people the search results, what I send is a Word document with all of the strategies in, but at the top of that Word document will be a table saying which database was searched, what was the provider of that database, and what was the number of results. And then I put the strategy with the numbers in as well, but they've got that top reference at the top, and any references that they need as well, I'll just pop below the table. Then I give them the full strategies, and then I send them the risk files as a separate thing.
Yeah.
So they get the full package. But this is the
it's up to
thing.
them, isn't it?
Yeah, the risk files aren't watermarked, so they're just getting that. If I do a search for a clinical search, then it comes with all of our branding all over it. So I think that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just ask my deduplicate. Sometimes, depending on how I feel. If I'm feeling generous, I will, but not always.
I tend to deduplicate, yeah. Right, okay, that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Pip, on the penultimate, can you believe it? The penultimate presentation of this programme. We've got one more left next month. Thank you, Pip, been amazing.
Thank you.
As I told you it would be. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I will see some of you next month, hopefully. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.